Hi, Taylor.
Hey, Kevin.
How are you?
Good. Glad to be here with you.
Nice to see you. I appreciate you jumping on the call with me today. Genuinely really excited to dig into what we've been able to pull off together through our partnership, and also talking about some of the results and the conversations we've been able to get for Ennoventure, especially really focusing on the enterprise space and the type of companies you're going after. So really looking forward to getting into all of that. So I think a great place to start, Taylor, would be, obviously for everyone who's watching, a quick introduction to yourself, and also in terms of what Ennoventure does.
Yeah, absolutely. So Taylor Tressel, Chief Commercial Officer for Ennoventure. Ennoventure is a small brand protection organization that uses AI and ML particularly to offer an invisible signature on packaging, on material. And in fact, because it is invisible, it allows companies and organizations to actually authenticate, using it for product authentication in a way that traditional, more legacy solutions that are overt makes it way too easy for counterfeiters to copy themselves. So the fact that Ennoventure has an invisible solution used for this type of product authentication simply with a mobile device is an intriguing problem-solving solution for the brands that we're working with. Now, then going back to the enterprise, I always make the joke that counterfeiters are only going to be counterfeiting some of the largest organizations, right? You don't go after small ones. And so this inevitably means that the type of organizations that find the biggest value out of Ennoventure are going to be very large ones, right? They're going to be multiple brands. They're going to be coming from fast-moving consumer goods. We're seeing a lot with pharmaceuticals. We're seeing a lot for automotive, for example. But these are not small companies. These are large companies that are constantly barraged with kind of inbound requests for their time. And so that is something that a small organization like Ennoventure is kind of naturally going to struggle with.
And I think you've actually nicely brought us into the next part of the conversation, which is before we started working together, it'd be really interesting to understand what was going on and potentially what kind of walls were you or your team hitting when trying to get in front of enterprise prospects? Because as you rightly said, this is not small fish. You're going after, when we started mapping out the ICP, we were looking at companies that were doing at least $500 million in revenue globally. So that's not easy, as you say, in terms of being able to find the relevant people and actually be able to get in front of them. So it would be really interesting to understand before we came into the picture, what were you doing? Was it an internal team, experience with other agencies, etc.? And just an overview of how things were working out on that front would be helpful.
Yeah, it's in a previous role in a cybersecurity company, I had worked with a couple other firms that had been kind of very traditional when it comes to outsourcing outreach, right? And in that organization, I had a large SDR team. Within Ennoventure, have an SDR team, right? And so what we have found, however, where you and I first connected was around deliverability for email, right? And we do not, while we have an SDR team, we simply don't have the IT expertise to set up ways to help with that type of deliverability. And so knowing that AI agents helping to detect and classify emails and routing to different inboxes, even if messages coming from SDRs aren't getting labeled as spam, they're constantly getting labeled in a way that makes it sight out of mind. So that was the first part that we had struggled with, of really trying to make sure that we could determine that emails were getting through, right? That type of message, because while we don't rely entirely on email, it's always been a critical part of any type of outreach team's arsenal, right? You can't simply go with cold calling. You can't simply start saying, I'm going to start using LinkedIn messaging or something like that. If you don't have email, that is still where the world lives, right? And as far as that type of communication. And that was a struggle for us. So I'll just start with, that's where we began our process from an SDR side. While I have a team, it is not a significantly large team. It's actually a smaller team than I had at the cybersecurity organization. But also that also meant smaller opportunities to actually manage the group and to constantly refine what type of content we were using, try to have that type of flexibility when it comes to how dynamic we could be. So those are the two pieces that really kind of maybe jump in with Astris and the work that you were doing. One on the deliverability side, making sure that you have the wherewithal to get our message into the inboxes that we needed. And then two, having more flexibility when it comes down to the different campaigns that I could simply keep an SDR team, keep them focused, and then hand over other pieces to Astris as you were working on and helping to develop other type of campaigns for us.
Brilliant. No, thanks, Taylor. And that's really important for us. As we say, we're an extension of your team, a fractional outbound business development team with a real focus on the deliverability expertise, because for the benefit of people who are watching, a lot of people spend a lot of time regarding the messaging and list building and all of that. Whilst that is important, none of that matters if your message isn't landing or it's not even going to be seen in the first place. So one thing we're very proud of is maintaining a 95% plus inbox placement through all our testing, through the infrastructure set up, through everything that we do on an ongoing basis. So, being able to share and make that as part of our core capabilities is, I think, what will hopefully start as we talk more about the results and the type of opportunities that we've created and conversations we started, will hopefully coincide with because of a very, very strong deliverability, let alone, as you say, with all the other aspects of the campaigns, the different types where we tested lots of different angles as well, from, say, direct outreach to things like, say, executive keynotes and conversations about lead magnets and all those type of things as well. So I appreciate you giving some insights into that, Taylor. So actually, here's what I find funny, because we start our relationship or conversation using one of our own system, our own emails. That's what actually started our whole relationship. I always think it's a good sign if a firm is using what they do for clients and what they're saying as the mechanism to build their own business and pipeline. So that's what got our relationship started. What do you think, Taylor, helped you or made you pull the trigger in terms of partnering and working with us?
Yeah, it's a good point, because the first part on having the confidence in your description of how you were handling email deliverability, what was the starting point? The rest of it is you making promises, explaining how it works, and me hoping that it's going to work out from that perspective, right? What I would say is that the conversation that we had about deliverability, that was one of the core pieces of our problem. However, the next piece where you kind of were giving me more comfort as far as your ability to turn these around was your own use and leveraging of AI for messaging, for doing your type of research. It's all well and good that people put AI in a whiteboard and have an arrow pointing to it and say, start using that more to be more effective. But in fact, for SDR teams, they have their tools, their processes. I'm spending a lot of time trying to make sure that we level up as an organization from that perspective, right? But you were already doing that. And the fact that you could describe how you are actually doing your research, how you're using AI to be much more effective with the messaging and to kind of help measure the effectiveness of, whether it's ABC testing as well. Those are the pieces that kind of gave us the confidence to get started. And, I appreciated understanding what you're going to need to do to spin things up, right, from the infrastructure perspective and get going, and then starting to see the results in that time that you had kind of outlined for us and helping to see what you're doing day in and day out to push our message forward.
Amazing. Thanks, Taylor. Very, very helpful. And I think one part that might be useful to talk a little bit about is actually the onboarding and initial engagement, because I know for a lot of people, are we just going to send you some static form and get you to fill it out? We're very proud of our specific approach that we take to onboarding. And when we talk about being a genuine extension of your team, we can't do that just by you filling out a form, hence why we run those deep workshops and we really got to meet the team, etc. So hearing your personal experience on that initial onboarding piece would be very useful as well, Taylor.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. We had multiple sessions with the team to make sure that you understood what our messaging is, where we came from. In a way, it was kind of a lightweight onboarding session that we would have for people joining Ennoventure, as far as what the story is, where we came from, and the problems that we're solving. I appreciated that you all dug in immediately on what you were going to need to understand the problems that Ennoventure would be solving out there, how to capture that, how to make sure that message was as crisp and clean as possible. And you taking the time up front, not just saying, all right, give us the hints that your SDR teams have been using and we'll start using these, but really did take the time in meeting with our founder, meeting with our folks on the marketing side, talking through with other sales individuals so that you could understand what our process looks like. It was clearly helpful and necessary for the type of success we were looking for.
Great. No, absolutely, Taylor. And that's what I say to everyone as well. Like, the only way you get success from this is you have to have a collaborative and partnership driven approach. I think it's a great way you explained it. It's a true lightweight onboarding, as in if someone was to join Ennoventure full time. Thank you for sharing that piece as well, Taylor. So I suppose if we now talk and spend a little bit of time actually in terms of the results and the experience. So if we look at what we delivered, appreciating the long sales cycle and average order value and the lifetime value for the type of accounts and customers you're looking at. But within a short period of time of collaborating, we managed to generate meetings with decision makers of companies like Merck, Roche, Pfizer, BMS, Tata Motors, Mahindra, CEAT, the tire manufacturers, Colgate. So obviously, say global brands. And whilst initial focus was obviously in the US, we were then tasked and we agreed to go more international as well because of how the Ennoventure team is set up. So I think what's really important from your experience and on behalf of some of your team members, how were those conversations? How was the quality of those conversations? Any sort of insights on that, Taylor, please?
Yeah, I think that just getting those calls with those companies, right, and being able to, it showed immediately one is addressing deliverability, right? It was clear that we were getting the messages through. It was great to see the different types of campaigns that you were able to set up for us with the different personas, as it were, right? CEAT and Colgate are two very different companies, and making sure that you were kind of changing the message that was going to resonate with them was going to be helpful. Now, then what can be very difficult is, our technology, the fact that it's invisible, you're using AI, it's brain protection, you're using it just with, you're creating real-time data using just a cell phone. Plenty of people are interested just in, hey, I'm kind of curious to hear about this technology. And they can end up just being, I joke about people who might be interested in a science experiment just to see what it looks like. And you did a nice job for finding the individuals who are actually impacted and who have responsibility on whether it be brand protection side or supply chain and operations, who had the problem using product authentication in a different way. And so that was helpful for us rather than to be kind of just walking into meetings where people just have a kind of a vague interest to learn a little bit more, but it's not actually pertinent to their day-to-day jobs.
Yeah. That's really, really important for us, Taylor, and I think too many times where companies get stuck on, say, vanity metrics of lots and lots of calls, but those calls are, say, either not ICP, they are either way too early in the buying journey. I know for us with Ennoventure specifically, we specialized and focused very much on a lot of triggers and a lot of research that we did in real time and implementing that and building in a very tight list to make sure that those conversations were going to be as high quality as possible. And I think the other part really that would be useful for people who are watching this is to understand that whilst we supported with the direct outreach to prospects, we also had the capacity to support with, for example, you had some conferences, you had some events you were attending, and the fact that we were tying up and really just being an extension of your team to be able to make sure that those events and those type of events that you were going, you were being set up for success because people were aware that Ennoventure was going to be there. There were some calls that were getting booked in different parts of the world where these events were happening as well. So on that point, in terms of the day-to-day working and just general communication and just your personal experience on, we talked about how it was working together prior, we signing up, but then once we actually got going, the day-to-day working experience, anything on that front, Taylor?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point as far as you helping us when we had other shows and conferences that we were going to be attending. It goes back to my previous comment about the ability of Astris to set up multiple campaigns quickly and efficiently. And I have an SDR team where I could have them do that, right? However, it's better to leave that type of pivot to you, right? And you guys did a nice job with it in kind of quickly getting that out, whether it be a particular conference or a show that we're attending and looking to set up meetings that we had there. It helped keep the focus of the existing SDR team in place, right? Without having to make those changes. So I think that was particularly helpful. And heck, I mean, you and I talked a couple times a week throughout, and we have the weekly syncs to understand how the messaging was working, what type of campaigns you were setting up, where you're getting this type of information. And of course, just because we had 3 initial kind of lengthy sessions doesn't mean that that's all going to be completely internalized by Astris. And so we were able to say, actually, take a look at this, and be able to make sure that we could direct your efforts to be as efficient as possible from our own experience, right? So there's never going to be a single answer on these things. However, we're always looking to make sure that we could offer the type of guidance on where we thought Astris was going to be most efficient, when you could be more flexible and more dynamic in a pretty quick way with these different types of campaigns.
No, amazing. No, thanks. It's very, very helpful. And I think as we wrap this conversation up, I think a few last few points. So companies or CCOs or decision makers like yourself who are maybe watching this or maybe on the fence about going after enterprise because it seems too hard, or deliverability, or whichever the challenge is, anything you would say to those people?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a scenario where every company has their ICP, right? And whether Ennoventure has a challenge where there really isn't as much of a down market from that perspective, right? Like if you're going to be counterfeiting products, you're going to be counterfeiting the big guys, right? That's just the case. So anyone who's looking to do that, because quite frankly, whether you're looking to drive the value of a company, people in general are, whether it be other investors or other companies, want to see that you are enterprise grade, and you're going to want to have those type of lighthouse accounts on the enterprise side. And unless you have a marketing machine that is driving everything purely inbound, you need to be able to take control of your own destiny to a certain extent. And having Astris on our side, clearly being able to get the deliverability into the enterprise, being able to workshop the messaging that we're seeing, getting that feedback loop was very helpful for us. I think any organization is really going to need to have the outbound process to be successful. And there may be smaller organizations that could say, hey, I don't have this SDR team right now. I can outsource this to Astris and get a starting point there. What I would be saying to most organizations that do have at least an SDR team, to have them side by side, right? Because you have strengths on the Astris side or around the email and the deliverability and working on the messaging and using AI to get that done. For an internal SDR team on crafting that message, and that can be a feedback loop between them, between Astris, but there's inevitably going to be a need to gain some of those lighthouse accounts on the larger enterprise side. I think that Astris has proven itself to be a very effective partner to work on the infrastructure piece from an IT perspective and leveraging the tools that are out there in a more efficient way, perhaps, than organizations may be able to deliver to their own outbound SDR teams today.
Amazing. Thanks, Taylor. And really on the behalf of everyone on our end, it's a great partnership and it's something that we enjoy working. And we generally look forward to our regular catch-up calls and with everyone in the team as well. So the success is never one-sided. It's truly a partnership, and the fact that you and your team put in time into the relationship and into the process to make it as successful as possible. So thanks again, Taylor, for being here today on this call with me and for taking some time to share your honest and genuine experience with everything that's happening on that front. Yeah, looking forward to a long-term partnership and lots more success for us together.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate all your help with the partnership as well.